Now, as you know, I usually like to give you a pithy and incredibly interesting statistic as we go over to the circuit, and today is no exception. Did you know that more than 1,000 fresh salmon, 500 fillets of beef and more than 200,000 hamburgers will be sold at Silverstone this weekend? Told you it was interesting. John Watson and Ben Edwards are, of course, salmon people rather than hamburger people, but they put down their silver cutlery now and have their microphones at the ready. Ben, he could almost have gone fishing for his own salmon or old trout yesterday up at Copse, couldn't he?
He could have done that, yes. The weather conditions were actually appalling. The rain absolutely came down at one point, and the cars really all came back into the pits, didn't they? There wasn't any point in them being out there. I'm glad to say the conditions do look a little bit better today. 40% chance of rain, but at the moment, John, at least the track looks dry.
Yes, and I'm delighted to say that 40% to me looks like, hopefully it's going to be a lot less than that. And looking around the track, we've had some aerial views. It looks, I would say it's 95% dry. The only areas I would be careful of are as you go into Beckett's, the turn in on the right hand side. Drivers take a lot of the curb on the inside. That's a serrated curb. There'll be water still there, so you need to be careful. It's a big commitment in the dry, virtually flat out on a qualifying trim, probably 180 miles an hour on the entry into Beckett. So please be careful there. And all around the circuit, the use of the curbs and the exit of the corners is also going to be a problem. So any wet curbing, watch for drivers running over them, trying not to go over them on an angle, which of course would cause a bigger problem. Some of the curbs in the lower speed round we saw around Brooklands, and in fact Kimi Räikkönen, even in the rain, used all that curbing, didn't affect him, but other drivers getting anywhere near them found themselves rotating and going off backwards.
Well, we're taking a little look into the Williams pit here, as ever, diving right into the pit garages and taking a look at the revised colours on the Williams, as we heard from Montoya earlier on. Of course, they've got the Hewlett-Packard emblazoned all over the car now, and that will be the same for the rest of the season, with the compact name being removed. Hewlett-Packard having taken over the compact company, so the change. So I'm afraid that hat's out of date now because it needs to have Hewlett-Packard on it.
Yes, and in fact, I mean, it seems a very simple thing to do, to change a title sponsor or a major sponsor on a team, but what it involves is a massive amount of work, because it means all the team gear is going to be changed, all the livery on the cars, the transporters, all the support vehicles, all that's got to be changed. It may seem a simple thing to do on the one hand, but in terms, again, of logistics and time, it's a major operation. And of course, it's not just done literally at somebody's whim or fancy. This has been long thought out and planned, and all the various concept of how the car, new livery car, will look has got to go through so many different boards and committees before the final decision's made. Nevertheless, for Juan Pablo Montoya and Ralf Schumacher, they're at the very sharp end of all this. They just got to jump into the car, go out and get the job done. And that's really something they want to do very desperately after the disappointment that they had in the Nürburgring 2 weeks ago.
Well, inside the Jordan pit, they had a better day yesterday in the wet conditions, with the Bridgestone intermediate tyre certainly proving to be the one to have. They had a good effort, with third place for Fisichella and fifth place for Takuma Sato. So they were boosted a little bit by that, but we'll have to wait and see how the local team gets on here at Silverstone in these slightly drier conditions. Certainly hoping for good things and a good turnout of crowd to watch this free practice session this morning. And with Jordan's efforts there, with everybody supporting them, I'm sure they'll be looking for some good results. And in fact, Peter has caught up with Jordan's technical director, Gary Anderson.
Gary, most difficult question, first of all, bearing in mind we've got clouds approaching, it's a bit dull now. What is the accurate weather forecast for the next 48 hours?
Well, our weather forecast, accurate or not, it's supposed to be reasonable today, to be honest. The likelihood of rain is very small. If it is, it'll just be a few drops. Getting a little bit worse for tomorrow. So I think it's going to be dry, but coolish.
So things have changed somewhat since Eddie Jordan told us yesterday that it was going to be fine on race day.
Yeah, I mean, it's moved a bit, to be honest. It keeps doing that. It's very difficult. We've got our weather forecast guy, and he's constantly gives us an update every 15 minutes. So yesterday, to be honest, he was probably within 30 seconds of the little drops of rain that we got during the sessions. So it's very accurate. So we keep an eye on that and see what happens.
And as John Watson was pointing out on the show yesterday, there is this microclimate here as well, because it's such a relatively large expanse of land here.
Yeah, but I'm not really old enough to know about the microclimate. John is probably, yeah.
So let's talk about the cars. A good day yesterday, Gary. Looked very good in those transient conditions, particularly on the intermediates. Both drivers very quick.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, we've done a lot of running around here, so we've got a reasonable sort of start point. The car has always been reasonable in the wet, and It's just whenever everything dries up and the big boys get going, it starts giving you a bit of a hammering, but we've got to do the best we can.
There seems to be a renewed energy at Honda now. Does that energy manifest itself in power as well at the moment?
Well, hopefully it will do. I mean, it hasn't done it just yet, to be honest. But they're all working very hard as we are with the car. You know, it's like anything. It's a very tough job. You set yourself a sort of concept and go for it, and you know, you hope it works out. But if it doesn't, you have to just recover from it. And at the minute, they're trying to take the steps necessary to compete with the best.
Well, very best of luck. We'll watch you with interest. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Well, there's one of the classic Silverstone hares, John. They've been a feature of the track for many years. Sometimes I'm afraid they've been collected by the racing cars, and hopefully that one will get away free.
Yes, I haven't seen a hare around Silverstone for quite some time, but clearly on race day they do pop up, and their sort of natural habitat does get disturbed, and that one wisely getting well away through the gravel trap before the action begins. And just listening to what Gary said, the weather pattern around here, hopefully we're going to see a dry day, but Mika Salo, now we didn't see him on Friday. He was locked up in his motorhome on the circuit suffering from food poisoning, and he was advised by the doctor not to drive at all on Friday, but now back in the car, out on track for the first time Saturday morning.
Yeah, good to see Mika back out on track, and Takuma Sato in fact leading everybody onto the circuit this morning for the first of this 45-minute session. Dry conditions first time this weekend for the drivers. They'll have to get a little look around the track, see if the curbs are dry as well. Jenson Button had a reasonably good day yesterday, running fairly well in the Renault with its revised aerodynamics. They're looking forward to this race meeting, and there we are, grooved tyres on for dry weather running, and we didn't see them used at all during yesterday's sessions. The best they could do was put on intermediates, but it never got dry enough to run grooved dry weather tyres.
So for everybody, the first, there's that hare, indeed, a Jaguar, and I'm just looking to see whether that was Pedro de la Russo. It was Pedro, and that was coming down hanger straight, and another hare ran across just in front of the Jaguar. Now, if one of those creatures hits a Formula 1 car, they weigh about 3 to 4 pounds. Let's look at it again. Leaps across, ears down. Dear me, that was Eddie Irvine, in fact. Yeah. I think he might have just have actually marginally, but if not, I mean, the vortex around the wings must have given it a right old stirrup. And let's hope that's the last we see of wildlife on track today, because do a substantial amount of damage to a race car. Forget about what it might do to the hare.
Absolutely, yes. Well, I was going to say the other one got his timing just right, whether it was the same one or not, I'm not sure. But getting out of the way just before the start of this free practice, that one certainly left it a little bit late. Michael Schumacher, fast yesterday. The two Ferraris, of course, dominating the situation in yesterday's free practice sessions. Again on the Bridgestone Intermediate tyre, which seemed to be the one to have. But I think we could see at times a lot more close as we go through the course of today's free practice sessions. And good news also to see that both the Arrows have gone out onto the track, and indeed I think Matt now has the chance to speak to Arrows boss Tom Walkinshaw.
Yes, thank you, Ben. Tom, first questions first. What's the immediate future of Arrows?
Well, obviously we're racing this weekend. We've got things sorted out with Cosworth that are satisfactory to both of us, so we're racing this weekend.
Tom, many people were surprised with the speed with which this seemed to happen. It was a very sudden deal. Is that how it appeared to you?
Which deal was sudden?
Well, when it actually happened, when the news broke, many people were surprised. It all seemed to happen very quickly.
Yeah, but which news are you talking about?
The
news with
bad
a problem
news.
or the news we'd solved it?
The news that you were in court and that you had problems.
Well, yeah, it's been building. The company for months had been in negotiation with Morgan Grenfell on a solution to their shareholding position, and it became deadlocked, and the only thing to do was to try to go to court to lift it, and the whole thing got out of control.
Well, to move on to the speed with which the problem has apparently been resolved, what have the last 48 hours been like for you?
Stressful.
So what has come into play? What's different now from Wednesday?
Well, before we went to court, and for the last 1.5 to 2 months, we were not allowed to put any new capital in the company because that was frozen by a High Court injunction. and we had new investors wishing to come in, and we'd had preconditions sorted out with Morgan Grenfell, and we'd always made the condition that with everyone who's come in, and lots of negotiations had taken place, that we would have the priority given to unsecured creditors. And the judge thought this was abnormal, and we couldn't show them any the information to show that it wasn't abnormal, because all the agreements that we had with the other shareholders were without prejudice.
So, Tom, what's the news on the long-term future for Arrows?
Well, I think now that will be sorted out over the next 2 weeks. There are 3 parties wishing to either invest in the company or take it over completely, and those negotiations will have to reach a conclusion over the next couple of weeks, I hope.
Well, good luck with that, and good luck today, Tom. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Well, good to hear straight from Tom Walkinshaw there, John. Looking tired, I have to say. He said how stressful the last 48 hours have been, and you could see that on his face, etched on his face. But the great news is that Arrows are racing here this weekend and hopefully do have a future.
Well, I'm delighted to see the cars running today, and I think the Arrows team has been around a long time, since 1978, if I remember correctly. Still to win a Grand Prix, of course, and that nearly happened back in 97 when Damon Hill was leading the Grand Prix in Hungary, and only in the last lap did he lose the lead. So I hope the future is bright for the Arrows team, and I do hope that the problems that have dogged the team over the last few months have been resolved to everyone's satisfaction, and that the team can move forward. I know there are some pretty exciting ideas and prospects, and if those come to fruition, then we could see that a very secure Arrows team in the future.
Well, as we say, fingers crossed. It's good to see the 2 cars out there. That's the important thing. Enrique Bernoldi has completed his installation lap, as has Heinz Hull Frentzen. So they will be in action today, and that's the important aspect. They've got their Cosworth engines. They're up to do battle with the Jaguars, of course, once again. And Eddie Irvine today getting a clearer picture, perhaps, whether the modifications that have been made to the Jaguar will actually work for this weekend and indeed for the rest of the season. That's still to be ascertained. They've done some testing. They were at Barcelona last week. A little bit inconclusive to know whether the changes, the aerodynamic modifications that we've all been waiting for and that have been much talked about in the press, well, they're here, but will it make a difference? Hopefully today we will find out.
Interesting, that comment on the radio traffic that we were listening to. It said box off. Now what that means, I'm not quite clear. It could be anything from the gearbox, which would be a major setback for Irvine and for Jaguar, or it could be something less complex. And of course they can't use spare cars right now. They won't come into use until we get into the qualifying session. That's the first time a spare car can be used. And likewise, David Coulthard at McLaren pointing down to the side pods, and they've now been removed from his McLaren and work carried out by their engineers.
Well, we're just, sorry about the little interruption in picture. A little bit of cloud, as you can see, well, quite a lot of cloud, but no actual rain falling. But with only 1 car on track at the moment, let's catch up with some of the people in the pit lane. Peter Windsor has called up with Ross Brawn.
Ross, there's a question that everyone's been dying to ask, and that is why the engine stalled yesterday when Michael spun. It's relatively unusual to see that.
Yeah, we have an anti-stall system, obviously, but also we have a safety system which, if the driver's got his foot hard on the brakes, under certain pressure, and also has his foot on the throttle, we cut the engine. It's a safety device for the fly-by-wire throttle. And unfortunately, at that moment, Michael had his foot hard on the brakes and blipped the throttle, and just exceeded the settings for the throttle, and it cut the engine. So it's just one of those things, very unusual, and doesn't normally happen. But so we just got caught out.
Was the throttle blip part of trying to get the car round to keep the thing going?
I think he was in a spin. He had his foot hard on the brake to slow down, and being Michael, he was doing several things at once, including trying to blip the throttle to flip the car around, and it cut the engine.
And talking to you on the radio?
No, he didn't do that this time. So.
Okay, thanks very much for the explanation.
Well, that's great. And once again, proof there, John, of Michael Schumacher always seemingly in control. That's what surprised us really yesterday, wasn't it? The fact that it did stall. We've got a great explanation there from Ross.
Yes, I mean, at the point we saw the stall, I mean, I was surprised because normally that does not happen. Ross explained why. and it was a bit of an anomalous situation, but at least it confirms that we got it right, that something did happen that was in a sense beyond the driver's control, because the safety devices on board, the preset devices which prevent an engine either going maximum throttle and possibly putting a driver in danger, or in situations like this, but just it actually was almost too clever for its own good, and the driver was caught out consequently.
Well, we're riding on board here with Alan McNish. Great pictures from that camera mounted in the wing mirror, in his right-hand wing mirror, looking across. This is through the fast bridge corner. You can see a bit of heavy cloud in the background there, by the way. And now he comes into the complex section. This is the left-hander at Brooklands. He's now heading towards the series of stands on the outside of Luffield, where fans get a great close-up view of the car in action. And, of course, listen to the traction control. Hard at work on the exit of Luffield.
Just watching on the exit, he drops a wheel on that curving. Small amount of moisture still retained in those serrations. So Alan McNish goes and does a 1:27.149, which is clearly the fastest lap that we've seen over the 2 days now. But let's watch Felipe Massa, no doubt going to entertain us as he's done all season.
Yeah, and yesterday as well. He got a bit out of shape there, got it back together again. Yesterday he had one or two little offs. He said that they got the car much better by the end of the day than they had at the beginning. He said it was a little bit all over the place, but by the end of the day he was reasonably happy with the performance of his Sauber, and the two teammates ended up fairly evenly matched.
Well, it's not been a brilliant British Grand Prix so far for Eddie Irvine in that revised Jaguar, because what we heard from the radio traffic from the engineers saying box off, in fact, does turn out to be a gearbox problem. And with this only being a 45-minute session, with under 35 minutes of it remaining, Eddie Irvine's prospect of getting out in this part one of Saturday's two practice sessions looks very bleak indeed. And he's only got half an hour between the two sessions, so a lot of work for the Jaguar team to get Irvine back out on track. And I mean, another disaster. He calls this a jinx Grand Prix. Well, I think that's Eddie being Eddie, but nonetheless he's never really enjoyed Silverstone to the full degree that he ought to have done, and seems to be continuing.
Michael Schumacher happy to sit out the early stages of this morning's free practice. It's Toyota who are doing more laps than anybody. Massa's just gone fastest, faster than McNish, but here's Mika Salo as he now gets some laps under his belt, having suffered that food poisoning yesterday, told by the team doctor it was best to just sit it out for the day, and now hopefully he's okay and is ready to do some work on setting up this Toyota. Peter, I think you learnt a little bit more, didn't you, about Mika Salo's illness yesterday?
Yes, I did, Ben. Not too much, but I don't think it was food poisoning, actually, because apparently he ate with the team on that evening in question, and he is staying in his motorhome, so he didn't really eat anything differently from anybody else, and nobody else was ill. It was more a sort of virusy stomach bug type thing, and he is feeling better today. Obviously, he's in the car, but I'd be surprised if he's 100%.
Right, well, good to hear that. Let's hope that he is feeling a bit more up to it. Of course, qualifying today, race tomorrow, and tomorrow is when he's really going to need the consistency and feeling in top shape for the Grand Prix in the afternoon, 60-lap Grand Prix. Quite a tough racetrack, this one, John, in terms of physically demanding, particularly through that Beckett section.
Yes, it is. It's a tough circuit physically, and 60 laps round here is a real beating up. But interestingly, Mika Salo, who spent all day yesterday languishing in his motorhome watching a bit of TV, reading a few comics, he's as quick as McNish, who spent all day running Friday, mind you, in the wet. Probably was no advantage to Alan, but nonetheless Mika Salo immediately out on the pace of his teammate as we watch Heinz Harald Frentzen. But it's Bernoldi, his teammate, who's actually fastest of everybody to date. Frentzen, he's about 3.4 seconds, but Bernoldi doing a 1:25.172 on his fourth lap, having never run on Friday. Well, there you are. I mean, what can you say? If ever anything was earned and due, it's due to the Arrows team, having put behind them the legal difficulties which beset the team in the run-up to this Grand Prix. Currently fastest car on track, Enrique Bernoldi, Brazilian, no doubt buoyed up by the fact that his home country won the Football World Cup, but I don't think he's got a Ronaldo haircut, do you?
Well, no, that's right, but indeed they're looking very strong out there at the moment. I have to say, both cars going quickly. Frentzen now fast on that next lap. He's put in a very first sector time, and it's good to see that. And of course, John, with the conditions yesterday, they haven't really lost out this weekend, because I don't think the other teams had an opportunity to learn much except about intermediate conditions yesterday.
No, I think that if anything was going to work in your favour was the weather, and that certainly helped Arrows, because while they would have been benefited from wet weather running, as everybody would have benefited, should it be wet, for example, during the race. Ours will now really have to sort of lick the finger and just go on instinct if that happens to turn out to be the case. As we watch Frentzen really fighting coming through Luffield, just really trying to play catch up, fastest and first and sector times.
Across the line, yes, he goes fastest overall, so that's a good lap from Frentzen. A 1:23.352. Just to give you an idea, last year's pole record, a 1:20.447.
And he's right on it through Copse. You could see as we rode on board with Frentzen through Copse, down a gear, but really leaning on the car, generating a lot of grip. And I expect to see a marginal improvement again from Frentzen. That 1:23.352 is pretty much, I suppose, your first genuine flying lap. It does take a couple of laps just to revalue the circuit, get a feel for what the track conditions are like, but that's pretty impressive on your fifth flying lap. Or fifth lap, not even flying lap, fifth lap.
That's right. You can still ride with Frentzen if you wish. In fact, no, with the onboard now, switch to Alex Young. So if you want to ride on board with the drivers around Silverstone, remember Sky button number 6, and that'll take you right into the cockpit. And I'm currently watching Alex Young in the Minardi. We're watching Felipe Massa in the Sauber here, and Massa 4th fastest, and he's on a good lap. This one should improve. Let's see, it puts him 3rd fastest. So we now have the 2 Arrows and the 2 Saubers. Massa just ahead of Heidfeld.
And once again, Frentzen fastest in that second sector, just continuing a run of laps. You may do a total of 10 laps just to get a feel, just to give the team some information as soon as possible.
Now listening in.
I'm not happy with the downshifting of the gearbox.
Well, gearbox problems for Eddie Irvine, we heard earlier, John, fairly serious. Not so serious for Salo, but they've got to try and get that sorted out.
Yeah, sounds more like a software problem than a mechanical problem. And of course, it is always a problem because this is done outside of the driver's control. That's why a manual gear change with a conventional clutch allows a driver so much more feel and control over the down, or for that matter, upshifts in a gearbox. But of course, the method now used by Formula 1 cars, and the Jordan's just pulled off, and that's Fisichella just on the entry into Stowe Corner. So that's disappointing for Jordan after a very strong run on Saturday morning, Friday afternoon. And he climbs out of the car, and that's a car that will not be back on the track until we start the second part of Saturday morning practice.
That's a shame for the Italian. After that disappointing run at the Nürburgring, his 100th Grand Prix ended rather disastrously, with him actually taking out his teammate Takuma Sato at the start of the race. But Fisichella now out of the car at the point furthest away just about from the pit lane, so that's a little unfortunate for the Jordan team, who'll have to wait until the end of this session, just under 28 minutes before they can get that car back in and deal with whatever problem has affected it. They had a number of niggling hydraulic problems earlier in the year, but they managed to fix those. They found some good fixes, and in fact I was reading the other day that Gary Anderson employed the services of his dentist and some of the special equipment that his dentist uses to make a temporary fix on one of their hydraulic pumps that was causing problems earlier this year. They now have a more permanent fix for that, but enterprising as ever is Gary Anderson.
Well, certainly Gary, I mean, one of the great engineers in the pit lane as well as designers, and having the open-mindedness to go to your dentist to get a fix for a problem in a racing car, certainly I think is pretty much a new one, and certainly could go into the racing drivers or the racing engineer and designers' book of excuses for mechanical failures. And I would like to see that one. I'd like to see that one in what happens, how he did it.
Now I think we've got the opportunity to speak to Niki Lauda. Niki, can you tell us what's going on with Eddie Irvine's car? He seems to have a problem.
Yes, there's a problem with the 5th gear. We just have to see what it is. He couldn't select out of 5th gear, so therefore we have to check.
Generally, have you had any chance to see how those new aerodynamic modifications are working? I know it's very early stages yet, but any feedback from the drivers?
Yeah, the crucial day is today, as you can imagine. But now if we don't run because of a gearbox problem, we'll find out less. So what we really have to fix quickly is the gearbox, and that both cars drive, and then see what happens in qualifying.
This is an unusual problem, presumably. Just one of those freak things that has gone wrong, or have you suffered any gearbox problems throughout the year?
No, generally speaking, our gearbox is pretty reliable. We just have to check out now what the real problem is, but we only know when we take it apart, which the mechanics are doing now.
Great, thanks for joining us, Nicky. Let's hope that they get it fixed. We want to see, like you do, just how well the Jaguar can get on track today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Session up until qualifying, but De La Rosa did improve. He had a personal best and he's got himself a little bit closer to Trulli and to Frentzen. Just watching, is that Olivier Panis? I believe it is indeed, and he's off down at Vale, the bogey corner pretty much for everybody in Friday's wet practice session. He's beached, and it looks like he may also have stalled an engine, and watch the steering wheel being detached and Olivier Panis stepping out of the car as the marshals get to him. It's caught again in a slightly precarious part of the racetrack. It's just on the inside of that Vale corner as David Coulthard comes down. There you see the VAR parked. It's in a safe part of the corner. It would be unlikely another racing car would get there unless deliberately driven there, and that's not going to happen. So of course driver required to slow down in a yellow light or yellow flag zone. Coulthard just going through a series of runs. This is his fourth lap. He's not actually completed a timed lap. This will be his first timed lap of the morning. And in fact, in that second sector, David Coulthard was in fact fastest of all. Now, that may be an issue because Coulthard, by going fastest of anybody, could find himself slightly in a state of bother because he is quickest of everybody in a yellow flag zone.
Well, let's see where this puts him overall as he crosses the line. It does put him fastest overall, so he goes ahead of Frentzen, but then you would expect to see a McLaren Mercedes ahead of an Arrows, and he continues through. Now, coming up towards the Beckett section, this fast sequence of corners, and Coulthard focusing on the corners ahead, concentrating hard, as is Rubens Barrichello as he waits to come out in the Ferrari, the fastest man from yesterday, winner of the last Grand Prix, of course, at the Nürburgring, and in confident frame of mind. But here is his teammate, and you know, if Michael Schumacher wins the next 3 Grand Prix, starting here at Silverstone, then he will wrap up the world title. That's an amazing thought, a little bit of a depressing one in terms of people wanting to see the championship go down to the wire, but you have to say he is superb, and we can watch and ride with him right now.
Interesting to watch a Formula One car through the Becketts. It takes lines which are not what are considered the normal, traditional line. What he's trying to do is maximise momentum at all points, and the car position coming through the left hand of Becketts is not necessarily what you would be taught if you went to a motor racing school, but he is fastest through that first sector of anybody so far with a 25.9. When you compare Coulthard's 26.4, which is Coulthard's personal best, he currently is quicker. So Michael Schumacher about to knock lumps off David Coulthard's 123.265.
This is where he spun yesterday in the wet. No problems this time. Listen at bridge. Flat out through there, even in the free practice sessions in qualifying. They will be flat, no doubt. And now through the tight and twisty stuff where the Ferrari should be so strong.
And he's over a second already up in that second sector. So probably going to see something, maybe a high 1 minute 21 or a low 1 minute 22 for Michael Schumacher on his first flying lap of the day.
Across the line, and look at that, 1.5 seconds faster than David Coulthard. There's that fast Copse corner, you could really see it there.
I mean, I want to ride on board with Michael all around this circuit because the view that you're going to get from the Ferrari or into the front-running cars out of Copse all the way up through Maggotts, Beckett is absolutely outrageous. I mean, that's basically just fraction over a second off last year's pole on what is his 4th timed lap. In fact, it's only his first proper flying lap. Now he's dropped back, he's 0.8 of a second down. He's probably going to come in, and he's hear him through Stowe. As we go back to David Coulthard again, personal best for Coulthard, and Coulthard looking to see a massive improvement. But look at that, 1.1 seconds down on Michael Schumacher's time.
Tyre evaluation going on here, John. Of course, they didn't get the chance to. Jarno Trulli looking for a bit more front grip, he says. Yeah, here we go. Look at that. Look how much he's up on time, John. Nearly 0.7 of a second.
Look, he's fiddling behind the steering wheel. There's a button at the top of the steering wheel. Twice there, third time he's adjusted. And I wonder, is that to adjust the amount of... It could be brake balance, or it could be something to do with the amount of lock in the differential. He's adjusting something on the steering wheel as he turns it. I mean, 1:21.008. I mean, that's now within just over half a second of last year's pole time on his 6th lap.
Very impressive indeed from the Ferrari. And here's Kimi Raikkonen now with the McLaren. Let's see where this puts him. Accelerating out of Luffield. Not a bad lap, this one, from the Finn. And his first real attempt puts him on a 23.0. That puts him into 3rd position. But of course, that's 2 seconds slower than Michael Schumacher just achieved.
And Rubens Barrichello also slips up 0.8 of a second behind his teammate. So the Ferrari is once again 1st and 2nd quickest. Barrichello has only done 4 laps. He's on his 5th lap as we speak. Back to Jenson Button to see whether he can claw back time. He lost in 2nd and 3rd sectors. No, it's not. No improvement. In fact, it's getting worse.
There, look at the speed into Copse Corner. That is such a big commitment corner. So fast and blind on the turn-in as well. And then more commitment required up here. Let's just take a look a second through this section. Very impressive, just using a little bit of curb on the exit. But Button really pushing the Renault hard, of course, with these new aerodynamics, hoping that will help them get on terms a little more with McLaren and Williams in particular.
Well, you go back to Kimi Raikkonen. This is a replay for the Finn, and there you can see the moisture coming off those curbs. You have to be careful. I think that's in the exit of Club Corner. There's the new safety tarmac, that high modular tarmac. Look at the back of the car, quite soft as it bottoms out. And those are not severe bumps, yet the car is actually getting very close and on a number of occasions kissing the ground. Back to Raikkonen, personal best, 1st and 2nd sectors.
Great view looking through the front suspension here, and that's through Copse Corner, the far sequence, and you can see how stiffly the suspension is set here at Silverstone. The back might be a bit softer, but this is the very high speed section now.
Look at the tyre deflection. Look at the way the loads affect the sidewall. It seems to almost grow and shrink as it goes through that right, left, right.
Yeah, fascinating to see. He's heading down the Hanger Straight here, building up to over 180 miles an hour, 190 miles an hour on the approach to Stowe, and now through the right-hander, accelerates hard again. Now he's coming up to a tight section where he's braking so hard, and yet virtually no deflection on the car at all under the most severe braking. That shows you how stiff the car is.
So Raikkonen now, this is the part of track we had the rear view of his car. You could see the back of the car low to the ground, and at some points on those very slight bumps was actually bottoming out and just little puffs of blue and the brown material.
Through Bridge Corner now, coming through Priory and into Brooklands. You can only see the suspension move really when it goes over the curb slightly. Now into Luffield, and this is where he waits and then gets on the power. Traction control cuts in, and now around to complete the lap once again. Let's see what the lap time is as he crosses the line, a 1:23.157, so a fraction slower than his best so far.
Of course, everybody has gone out on brand new tyres this morning because they didn't use the 10 sets available to them over the weekend. Nobody ran on dry tyres whatsoever yesterday. So the times we're seeing are slightly, in one sense, artificial because they are set on brand new tyres. And of course, the tyre companies have got two options here this weekend. So the teams are going to go through at least two brand new sets of tyres, I suspect, initially, before they decide what way they want to go for the second part. And there's McNish getting caught out, coming out of Priory into Brooklands. He ran wide, just went over the curb. The grass and the edging of the curbing is, of course, still extremely wet. And
So they must be running plenty of fuel on board again and not putting in any particularly quick times. as we listen to Frentzen.
And I think it should be fine now.
Still some work to be done there, of course, and currently still 4th fastest, so that's still a good effort from him.
Well, there's the family steward with His Royal Highness Prince Andrew, and Jackie, of course, as president of the BRDC, has that responsibility to look after any members of the royal family who make an attendance, and let's hope that we'll see Prince Andrew here on Sunday as well. Having spent last weekend watching Football World Cup, now he's back to the beautiful sport of motor racing and, of course, Grand Prix racing.
Yes, getting a good close-up view. That's down at Vale going into Club, right up on the outside there, and getting a good opportunity to see Formula One cars in action. Olivier Panis has made his way from that part of the track all the way back to the pits. I hope he got a ride from a bike somewhere, because it's an awfully long way, and Peter is catching up with him. I wonder if we're going to be able to...
The engine stopped for electronic problem, I think. I don't know.
We've heard that story so many times, not necessarily with your team. Modern Formula One, eh?
Well, you know, it's the way we need to improve.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Peter, and it's good to hear from Olivier, but frustrations, as you say, electronics usually the cause of the problems when we just see them coast to a stop out there, and it's proved the same for Panis. We're looking at Ralf Schumacher now through bridge.
And Ralph personally a best in first sector, nothing special in the second, and it may see a small improvement, but very much a Williams first day running in the dry.
Well, we've seen a number of drivers having problems with their cars today and stopping out either on track or in the pit lane. One of them, of course, Eddie Irvine. Nick Damon has caught up with him.
Eddie Irvine, not the best start of the day. What's wrong with the car?
Just a gearbox problem. It jammed in one of the gears, and we got a...
Not much activity. Are they given up for the whole day, or do they know what's wrong?
No, they've taken the parts that are a problem back. They're going to repair them and put them back in.
Now, we spoke to the end of practice yesterday, and you were unsure about the improvements. Did looking at the telemetry make you feel more confident about the revisions?
Well, you can look at telemetry until the guys come home. It's not going to tell you too much. You need to drive it, and we still haven't had a chance. It's a bit of a baptism of fire for the new car, to be honest, but we just got to keep working. You know, there's nothing else you can say or do.
Thank you very much, Steve.
So frustration for Eddie Irvine then, as he still awaits the chance to get back on track. We're riding with Michael Schumacher, and again he's faster.
Yeah, it's just over a tenth of a second, and pushing very hard, because it's always this rearward view of Michael Schumacher as he came out of Bridge Corner and having to pull the car sharply to get it back onto line to get into Priory. Now exiting Luffield comes a car start finish time. This will be an improvement, will be at 1:20.7. Again now within about 0.3 of a second of pole position time last year, which in fact was Michael Schumacher on the 1:20.447.
Yes, indeed, that's right, John. So he is really on the pace here this morning, and here comes his teammate Rubens Barrichello, who's challenged Michael several times for the pole position this season, and of course drove superbly well at the Nürburgring last time out. Michael perhaps throwing away his opportunity, particularly with that spin as they approached the first round of stops. But Michael will be determined to make up for that here this weekend, and as I mentioned, if he can win the next three, he could wrap up the title, and that would be at the German Grand Prix, and that would mean a huge amount to him.
Another interesting battle going on is between the two Honda teams, and right now BAR just ahead of the Jordan team with Villeneuve 8th and Takuma Sato 9th, and there's literally about a few thousandths of a second between these two drivers, and Sato again doing a really good job for Jordan on a racetrack where he's raced many times in junior formula. Knows that he can come here without having to learn a circuit and without that additional pressure, and strong showing from Sato. Fisichella of course stopped on a second lap out with electronical problems.
Villeneuve continuing round. The BAR Honda of Villeneuve currently 8th fastest. The other car we know off track, and Panis now back at the BAR Honda pit himself. Villeneuve, former twice winner of the British Grand Prix here at Silverstone, and in fact he was the last man to win this race from pole position back in 1997. It hasn't been won from pole since then.
And that little battle for Honda has now gone in favour of Jordan, because Sato, as we were speaking, in fact leapt up ahead of Villeneuve, and is now 6th quickest on a 1:23.520.
Let's see where. Oh, look at that!
Well, that's getting certainly not. But that isn't grass. That isn't grass. That is actually concrete with grass. It's one of these, what they call. It's like a veggie burger. It's not real meat, but it pretends to be meat. It's one of those things that. You've got concrete but allows grass to grow through it. It's done for the green lot, all those people that bleat on about things like that.
Well, it certainly gave him plenty of grip on the exit, and it's moved him up to 6th place, so he's now ahead in the Honda battle. Sato pushed back down to 7th, but here is Takuma Sato, and I wonder whether he's going to make some improvements on this lap. Let's watch and listen through bridge. That was pretty quick, looked good through there, and now making sure he uses plenty of curb on the inside as he comes through the left-handers into the complex. Now, not everybody gets tight into this curve. He gets a little tighter than some.
Could be the gurneys, Andy. All right, could be the gurneys, so just get ready with those as soon as you can.
So gurney is a return flap which you normally attach to the end of a wing, whether it's the front wing or the rear wing. Normally it would probably be put on the back, but if you want more front downforce, it's a cheap and dirty way of getting it very quickly. And in fact, you can actually just tape those down. The modern tapes are so good that they will keep that gurney, that return flap in position. But once again, looking at Ferrari, this time it's Rubens Barrichello. And nothing particularly special on this run, 7/10 away from Michael Schumacher, which is about, he's actually 1.1 seconds slower overall, but this might see a marginal improvement in terms of closeness to his teammate, but nowhere near going to challenge him.
Across the line he goes, and 21.7, so a fraction faster than he was, but stays in 2nd place to Michael Schumacher. The two of them may be experimenting with different tyre compounds here, the option and the primary tyre that are brought along by Bridgestone in evaluation, and they have to decide which tyre to use before they go into the qualifying session this afternoon. Now, David Coulthard working on the Michelin tyres, of course, and looking for the best solution. Michelin coming with a much harder tyre here this weekend. It's a much more abrasive, much more grippy surface than we saw at the Nürburgring.
And also interesting to see, we get various onboard shots, and we're seeing front-end shots of various teams comparing the front suspension setup of the Bridgestone tyred cars against the Michelin. Noticeable on the Bridgestone tyred cars, they have a lot more front camber. In other words, the top of the wheel is actually closer to its partner on the other side than you see in the Michelin, so the top of the tyre angled in, whereas the Michelin one is nearer to being perpendicular.
Well, we'll keep an eye out for that as Coulthard continues round. Villeneuve still on a couple more laps to go quicker, and he does go quicker. 5th fastest now for Villeneuve, so that puts him ahead of David Coulthard. We're now riding with Rubens Barrichello. Barrichello will improve again on this lap. Again, not enough, I think, to match his teammate. That it will be a closer 21.1, so just under half a second slower than Schumacher.
Yeah, he picked up quite a lot of time on this. Is now Barrichello's. That was his 10th lap, onto his 11th lap. And Barrichello probably doing a run of about 3, maybe 4 laps. And again, this process of determining which tyre from Bridgestone are they going to opt for. As Olivier Panis, you can see the frustration. We heard the frustration when he was being interviewed by Peter Windsor. Really didn't want to talk about it, just wanted to get back to the pits and explain what happened and just get his car back as quickly as possible, get the fault rectified, and get back out again at 10:15 when the second part of this morning's session will start.
Well, that young lad waving the Michael Schumacher flag should be happy, because Michael is dominating this free practice session. Just a couple of minutes left to go before they get a short break of just half an hour to refattle the cars and get them back out once again. So any major problems are difficult to deal with, but hopefully little electronic glitches can be cured in that intervening period. David Coulthard coming over the line.
Yes, a good improvement from Coulthard. Let's see, well, he goes up to 6th place, not as much as maybe he or the team would have looked for, but again, going through a program, but it will be in the second 45-minute session with real pressure, and it's going to be a stunning session, because it will be at this point when the teams will have to make that tyre choice. So they will go through their program, they will have the cars, I think, fairly lightly loaded with fuel. And for Eddie Irvine, again, I mean, just Silverstone and Jinx seem to be two names that go together, and even Niki Lauda looking slightly uncomfortable as he looks up at the screen. Pedro de la Rosa currently in 11th place, and whether that's sufficient to convince Jaguar and their masters back in Dearborn Ford that all these changes have been worthwhile. I think it's a difficult time for everybody in Jaguar, and I just wish them all great success and hope that we see that team moving forward.
Now riding on board with Kimi Räikkönen, and this weekend the McLaren's running, of course, with the drivers' names on the rear wing very suitably. It makes it much easier to see which is which, and that's all part of the ban on tobacco advertising. That's why we see quite a lot of slightly different liveries on the cars this weekend, because of the ban on tobacco advertising in the United Kingdom, and it produces some interesting, different variations on the colour schemes and certainly on the words on the cars from the likes of Jordan and Williams, and indeed, of course, with McLaren.
Well, another glimpse at Paul Stewart, and he's got a bit of a cough if he hasn't got a cold, and Jackie, well, never short of a word for advice and insight, and we're not talking about the glorious 12th, which is coming up in August, of course, up in Scotland when the grouse season opens. Jackie, a magnificent shot, and no doubt if the grouse moors up in Scotland, Jackie will be up there blabbering away like mad.
That's right, yes, that's how he started his sporting career, isn't it? Shooting in the Olympics, indeed, and then before switching to motor racing, but very much enjoying it as a hobby nowadays as well. So we've only got a few seconds left in this free practice session. The track has remained dry throughout, which is great news for the teams who've been able to work on their cars. And there's the scrubbed Bridgestone tyre looking very good on the Ferrari.
Indeed it does. A little bit, there's a slight amount of I would call it rolling on the middle to inside shoulder, but nothing that I would worry about, and it's probably a function of the track still being fairly green, in fact very green, and also the fact that the tyre compound still on the softish side rather than the very soft tyres that we saw being used at the Nürburgring 2 weeks ago.
Raikkonen just flashed over the line there as the checkered flag came out. I don't know whether that means he got it or didn't, but Frentzen definitely has got another lap. He was the last, I think, and he's just gone faster, Frentzen. He's gone fourth fastest again. He was fourth earlier on, been pushed back a little bit, 22.532. That's only a tenth slower, would you believe it, than Raikkonen in the McLaren.
And then Michael Schumacher, just try and get a look. You can see running across the curve in that sort of serrated concrete. Well, 4/10 done in this lap.
Oh.
That's mighty. That is absolutely unbelievable. Just lifted and back on the throttle again. I mean, in a road car, if you go to that corner at 80 miles an hour, I tell you what, you wonder, are you going to come out the other side? He's entering that corner at about 170 miles an hour.
Just amazing. It is a really tough corner, that one, and Schumacher making it look easy as ever, but the speed, very, very impressive. There's Felipe Massa now out of the car, and with his teammate Nick Heidfeld down in 12th place, Massa himself in 14th. Salvo maybe here having some work to do. Barrichello just concentrating on what they need to do to make the car good for this afternoon's qualifying, perhaps. They've really been working on race setup, I should think, up to this point, but they do need to decide which tyres they're going to be running this weekend, select them for qualifying and then run them in the race tomorrow. It has to be said, they're looking strong once more, as we have expected all throughout this season. The Ferrari 2002 chassis has been absolutely superb, and it looks just the same here at Silverstone. Ben Oldie back in.
Yeah, just looking again, that right front, and now you see the left front. You can tell the way the camber is, because the inside shoulder of the tyre much more worn than the outside shoulder. Frentzen now comes in as well, just looking at his right front. Looks not bad. Frentzen's probably looks slightly better, in fact, than that on Bernoulli's. That's just maybe down to the individual driver preference in terms of setup.
Is the warm-up for these tyres, whether or not you'll get it out on the first lap.
Interesting comment there from his engineer, talking about how to warm the tyres up to get the best out of them. Montoya, actually, although he's coming in on this lap, he's set a personal best through the first sector.
Do an oil level check and a top up.
Okay, the end of the session anyway.
He'll be coming in now anyway, and he's put in some good times for him, although not particularly quick overall, just through the first two sectors. Now makes his way back into the pits.
Not at the moment. You happy to do that?
Listening to a little bit of radio interaction in the Williams pit.
Pull forward if you want. Stop in the box properly, and then lay rubber if you want. Remember, it's TC off on the top down. Top button.
TC off, traction control off, presumably. Putting some rubber down on his pit box. That will help him, of course, when it comes to the race itself, in terms of getting good grip from those rear tyres as he accelerates away after a pit stop. So the second time session is in its interim mode at the moment, because they pause for half an hour. Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello first and second for Ferrari once again. Raikkonen the fastest of the Michelin runners, in third for the McLaren Mercedes. Then it's Frentzen and Villeneuve, both on Bridgestone tyres. Coulthard sixth, Sato a good seventh for him, the Japanese driver performing well on the track he knows. Enrique Bernoldi showing both arrows well up there in the top 10, and then the two Renaults of Jarno Trulli and Jenson Button Well, they're ahead of the Williams, but how much fuel are the Williams running in this early part of the session? De La Rosa down in 11th place, so he did all the running for Jaguar, but still only 13 laps compared to 20 laps for one or two of the others. Heidfeld, for example, managed some 20 laps during that session. So Jaguar still short of track time with the modifications. Montoya down there in 14th place. Webber, a good 17th place, faster than both Toyotas of Salo and McNish. So that's a little bit of a surprise, but Webber knows and loves this Silverstone track, so he's pretty happy. Alex Young 20th. Irvine and Fisichella both failing to put in a time. Let's take a look back at the highlights.